Have you given any thought to contributing to the melt? It's easy to do. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. It helps to keep the magic happening here at the Melt. So I encourage you to karmically entangle yourself with the Melt today by subscribing monthly for less than the price of a container of goatee wax, or a prosthetic pinky, or a half stick of DMT butter, or an inflatable casket, or the shrunken head of an Atlantean supermodel, or a woolly mammoth's merkin, or a crystalline replica of Baba Yaga's hut, or a capsule of Sasquatch dander. Hello, my name is Chris Snipes, and you are listening to The Melt. Anyone who has taken the time to dig into the Bigfoot phenomenon, or who has listened to, say, more than 5 episodes of the Sasquatch Chronicles, knows that there is much more to Bigfoot than one can gather with just a cursory glance. They seem to be capable of defying the laws of physics with their stealth, quickness of movement, and to seemingly vanish into thin air. Sometimes they imitate birds, babies, and machinery. They can make you sick by huffing at you. They can shapeshift and run on all fours like a spider. They have been the stuff of oral traditions for hundreds of years. Today's guests, Timothy Renner and Joshua Cutchin, have written 2 volumes on all of the strangeness that surrounds this creature, and they are here today to discuss the 2nd volume. Joshua apologetically joins in about 30 minutes into the chat because of a schedule mix-up, so that's why you don't hear him at the first. I start off the conversation by asking Tim how the 1st and 2nd volumes differ.
It's kind of arbitrary. When Josh and I were getting all the chapters together, and we realized at some point, if we release this as one book, it's going to be immense. And it's going to be scary. People are going to see that book and be like, oh my God. So we said, we got to break it up into 2 volumes. How are we going to break it up? Excuse me. And it came down to folklore and evidence. And the reason why basically is because the folklore chapters were more fun to write. And I'd written all those first and they were done first. And he had his, I think he had written all his chapters for both books, and I was writing my previous book when he started, so I was behind him. And so I was playing catch up, and I knew if we could use the chapters I'd already written in volume 1, I'd have more time to work on volume 2 while we were getting volume 1 ready. So that's basically how it panned out. So we like to say there's folklore in volume 2, there's evidence in volume 1, but it's more it's definitely more folklore in volume 1, and volume 2 is more kind of experiential. It talks about more cases, Bigfoot cases, and more things like disappearing evidence and things like that.
And the book starts off with experiences with eyes, the eyes of Bigfoot. What's the difference between eye shine and eye glow, for instance?
Well, eyes shine if you've driven down the road and seen a deer or another nocturnal animal and your headlights hit it and they seem to glow. That is reflecting. It's something called a tapetum lucidum. It's a membrane in the eye that allows it to gather more light. So many nocturnal animals have it. Eye glow does not really exist in nature. It is self-illuminating eyes, which many Bigfoot witnesses report, and witnesses of other paranormal phenomena report as well. They're very insistent. No, this was not reflecting, this was glowing.
And how would that be physically possible? Or is that just a sign of the metaphysical aspect of all of this?
I think it's the latter. If you go through, every animal on the planet, there's not an animal that has glowing eyes on planet Earth. But if you go through these accounts of folklore, goblins and demons and, vampires and werewolves and all throughout folklore, all these folkloric creatures, have glowing eyes. It's reported in folklore again and again. Eyes of fire, glowing eyes, this and that, eyes like embers, et cetera, et cetera. It's reported there. You find it all the time. Where you do not find it is in the natural world.
Yeah, so strange. I can't imagine what that would look like. I'm not even sure how functional it would be. How would you see out of eyes that were emitting light? There's so many questions I have in my logical brain.
That's my thought as well. How would a light source, at or from your very eyes, aid in night vision in any way? It seems completely counterintuitive to the process.
Absolutely, and there are reports of them being different colors too, right?
Yeah. And I've seen eye shine and eye glow, both of which I assume were, I believe were some sort of other creature. We'll say I don't know if it was Bigfoot or not. I just saw the eyes, but. It's very eerie. It's very eerie.
I could imagine. I mean, if it's in the dark, those are going to be the things you see first.
Yeah. I on one occasion, I hit it with my flashlight. I hit something it was at least 8 feet in the air and two eyes about the size of a fist, and it was just complete reflection. I mean, that was eye shine. I turned my lamp and it just lit up. And I couldn't believe it. And you could physically see whatever it was just dead black. I wasn't lighting it up. I was just lighting the eyes up, but you could see it turn its head and then turn back and look again. It was and catch the light of the flashlight.
Wow.
Both times. It was really creepy. And then I've seen red eye glow very recently. And the thing about that is there's only certain animals that can have red eye shine. So even if it was eye shine and not glow, only certain animals have it, usually small animals, and these were definitely big eyes. Bears can have it, but I do not believe this was a bear. This was not acting in any way like a bear, and it was pretty local here. We have them, but they're rare.
And you just saw the eyes. You didn't see any...
Didn't see anything else. The guy that was with me said he saw something big, saw movement, but I could not. I only saw the eyes. In fact, I lost him for a while and got really freaked out because I didn't know where whatever it was went.
Wow. Holy shit. And could eye glow be used as communication, do you think?
Well, I have a good friend who told me about an area where he was seeing weird lights that supposed some Bigfoot stuff had happened there as well. And he insisted that they use these changing eye glow eye glow flashing lights as communications. Like green was good, red was bad, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, to me, that's kind of like putting a little bit too much human symbolism onto this stuff. But he swore left and right that's how they communicate. But very, very weird form of communication, if so.
Absolutely. And just the different colors of eye glow in the same creature.
You mentioned that before, and I kind of lost the thread. Yeah, there's been, as far as Bigfoot, there's been, red and white are probably the most common, but green, blue, yellow, all across the board. And again, if we're talking eye shine, animals tend to have one color. Bears will change color depending on their diet. They can get all kinds of, I don't think blue, but they can get pretty much any other color eye shine depending on their diet. But most animals have pretty consistent across the board color. You know, deer tend to be that white or whitish yellow kind of thing. No matter what. Some smaller animals like rodents will give you red sometimes. But yeah, so it's very, very weird that all of these different colors would be reported. But yeah, I'm definitely in the camp that we're not talking about a natural animal, which doesn't mean I don't believe it's real. Sure. I just don't think it's an animal like any other animal on the planet. But if you were thinking of it as such, maybe you say, well, maybe the diet affects it like it does bears. But, you know, the problem with this is, if we're thinking of Bigfoot as a natural animal, it would almost certainly be some kind of hominid or at least a great ape, and no high-order apes, monkeys, high-order monkeys or apes, primates, have a tapetum lucidum. Now, some lower-order primates do, like lemurs, but they just do not have that in higher-order primates, of which humans are one. If you take a picture and you see red eyes, and that's not a tapetum lucidum, that's actually the blood vessels reflecting the flash when you see humans with red eyes in photographs. So we do not have a tapetum lucidum. So it would be very, very odd if Bigfoot did. I like to say if they're natural animals, they're the kings of evolution. They have so many evolutionary advantages as to make them essentially paranormal anyway. Like, how could something evolve this many like special traits across the board?
Yeah, exactly. And some people get so convinced that they're physical beings, just physical beings, because they crap and they eat and they rip stuff up. But I mean, even if they're multidimensional beings, even if they can go between frequencies, change vibrations, however you want to say it, they could still, in one extreme of those frequencies, be physical creatures, and then change to something that's a lot more ethereal, or I don't know. I think they can be both, is what I'm trying to say.
And that's one of the most difficult concepts to grasp, I think, honestly, even for me, and writing about it. The fact that something could be apparitional and yet physical. I like to talk about, ghosts. So ghost hunters, these are essentially ethereal things, but ghost hunters for, decades have been leaving out powder to see ghost footprints in. So here is a ethereal being, essentially, that is leaving a physical trace. I knew a ghost hunter who said he got ghost fingerprints on a mirror. He was trying to get ghost hair in a comb he left out. And, to which I said, we're doing the same thing. You're just trying to get footprints in powder, and I'm trying to get footprints in the mud, in the woods. I'm in the woods, you're in a house. That's the only difference.
Exactly.
So it's a really difficult concept. And I came up with a sort of a model. If you know what a Mobius strip is, you can run your finger along a Mobius strip, and before you get to the other side, you will go all the way around the strip. Basically, before you make the circle, you will go all the way around both sides of the strip. So if you write apparitional on one side and physical on the other of a strip of paper, and then twist it into a Mobius strip, to me, that's a model I can work with. That allows me to visualize how something could be kind of both, that kind of exist in both the physical and the apparitional realm, which I think these things do. Now, whether that's a dimensional thing, they're stepping in and out of doorways, or they're ghosts themselves in some form, I don't know. I don't know the mechanism by which they do it, but I do know, here in South Central Pennsylvania, where I take a good many Bigfoot reports, and I've investigated a number of things and talked to witnesses who I absolutely believe. I've looked in their eyes and seen them, how upset they were and how scared and shocked they were, and I absolutely believe they saw something. And when they saw it, it was there. It was as real as anything else in the landscape at that moment. But I do not believe there's a breeding population here. I cannot believe it. We just could not have it here and have no record of them, other than some footprints in the mud and strands of hair and stuff. Their impact on the environment would be massive. I mean, a creature that size would have to eat constantly. And while the food's there, at least in the summer, it's, the impact, the record of them eating it just really isn't there, and it would be that they would have to eat a ton.
So many questions. And then you get accounts of Bigfoot moving either without footsteps or much quicker than would be possible physically.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The most common, one of the most common things reported, people say that it looked like it was gliding over the ground, like it was a cross-country skier or something. And like they had no resistance to it, to its movement. Very, very odd. And, I've gotten tons of reports from witnesses of that same thing. They'll tell me and they'll stress it, how fast they were and how it didn't move. It didn't have an up and down motion like any other animal would running. It's just like it was gliding across the ground.
Yeah, or they don't swing their arms, or they will be focused on the person that's looking at them and moving through terrain that's very rough and hard to navigate, and doing it without any fault whatsoever while focusing on the person that's watching them.
Yeah. It's again, if natural animals, they're forest ninjas and wizards and these incredible kings of evolution.
Yeah, it's so amazing. And then that makes me think too, like, okay, is this something, if they do fluctuate between frequencies or dimensions, is it something that they just do so naturally that they don't have to think about it? Like it's almost like a reaction, or is it something that's very intentional?
That's a big question. I mean, it's because they seem very, very intelligent. Like incredibly intelligent, to the point where it's amazing. Like some of the stories I've had are stunning. Like the intelligence that they would have to have of just dealing with people and some of these gifting exchanges where they're spelling out words and stuff for people. Amazing, just amazing. But at the same time, they do act like animals a lot. They do have a lot of ape-like things they do. Their hair bristles when they get upset. They have the pursed lips thing that primates do. They seem to have that sort of unpredictableness that animals can have. That where they'll just go from 0 to 50 at the drop of a hat. They're calm in 1 second and they're attacking the next. So they seem to have this weird combination of instinct and intelligence, and you wonder if it is some kind of instinct, if they're just phasing, however they're doing it, if they're just doing it by instinct and not even thinking about it.
Yeah. And speaking of language too, I mean, the sounds that they make also go anywhere from something that sounds like a wild animal hooting or yelping or whatever to something that almost sounds like language, and many people have described as language.
Yeah, there's a linguistic expert from the Navy who has worked with the stuff that Ron Moorhead recorded, and he says so his job was not necessarily to know every language, but to know what languages sound like and so forth. And he says whatever is being said there, he can't tell you what they're saying, but he says it is a language, and he's broken it down. He's the expert, not me. I forget his name, unfortunately, Scott something. But so he's the expert there. I would tend to take his word at it. So they have this, what is commonly called samurai chatter. I think we should probably find a better name for it, because it is not in fact Japanese. It sounds kind of Asian. I know people use that description because it sounds like the old samurai movies, and so forth. But I do think we should find like another word for it. But if you look into poltergeist accounts, if you look into Skinwalker Ranch and places like that, people report hearing these strange languages. I think at Skinwalker Ranch they described it as Russian in reverse. Sound like someone speaking Russian backwards. I mean, that could be the same thing. That could, or maybe not, but certainly sounds like something like this, samurai chatter stuff. Poltergeist accounts, there's been this, weird language, so indiscernible and so forth. So the fact that it comes along with Bigfoot and these other phenomena no longer surprises me. It's very interesting to me still, but it doesn't surprise me at all. But yeah, it seems like there's language. They can apparently mimic things to great effect. Again, down to mimicking, like learning names of pets and so forth, and names of people and calling them. Some people have heard and attribute it to Bigfoot. They've heard their name called in their own voice, or their dog's name called in their voice, like they heard their own voice calling their dog. Supposedly they can perfectly mimic, owls and birds, and even things like it's been on Sasquatch Chronicles. I think a witness was talking about it mimicking a forklift.
Wow.
Like, exactly. Like, just the sound of a forklift.
Crazy.
So again, there are animals that can mimic things, and there's like the lyrebird is particularly good at mimicking things, but it also doesn't have all these other advantages that the Sasquatch apparently has. So if it can do this and it's a natural animal, once again, it has so many advantages, it might as well be paranormal at this point, like, because nothing else has this.
And many people describe their voices as sounding very metallic. Yeah. Which is odd.
Yeah. Now, again, I've heard something metallic sounding, like a metallic sounding bird, out in the woods. I can't say that was Bigfoot, but, I've heard that sound. It's very eerie. All manner of sounds these things emit. It's very, very interesting. And I would say that, again, this falls under the umbrella of, like, same kind of stuff happens with poltergeist activity, and there's a lot in common there.
Yeah, lots of overlap for sure. And another thing that overlaps with poltergeist activity is lights. There's lots of balls of light that have to do that have some part in Bigfoot encounters, or they appear before or after. What are some circumstances that happens, and how do they manifest?
Often, people, most frequently you'll get the report of somebody who went out to an area that's known for Bigfoot activity, and while they're out there, they'll see these orbs. So these orbs of light, usually between like softball and basketball size, in that range. They kind of, floating through the forest. I've seen them before. I've seen all manner of weird lights. I've usually things that look like LEDs, which is really strange to me. They look like man-made LEDs. But the orbs are probably the most frequently reported thing. There's a few cases of Bigfoot seen holding an orb. One in Pennsylvania from the 70s. I think there was a Bigfoot holding a white orb. Two younger witnesses saw. I think they were like young women, like 12, 13, something like that. And then there's one from, I believe, the Soviet Union. They saw a creature walk through their camp holding a glowing orb. But most of the time, they're not seen at the same time. There's some people who, assert that this is another form of Bigfoot, that they come from another planet, and they come in this form, and then they can manifest into the Bigfoot form. I think that's, I need to see the receipts on that, but it's, it's what they say.
Sure. You're just the messenger.
Yeah.
Well, there was an instance on the Sasquatch Chronicles too, where this guy was talking about these orbs, or something, a tale his grandmother told him about orbs of light that would sort of come up to them when they're in the forest, especially when it was starting to get dark, and it would sort of lead them home. And one of the younger kids said, "I'm going to tackle it," and he goes to leap on it, and for a second, again, what the witness says is the kid got sucked into this orb, and then a couple of seconds later, it sort of, for lack of a better way of putting it, sort of spat him back out.
Wow.
Yeah. So maybe these are some sort of floating portal or something that they they move around in.
So the area that I was talking about before, where the guy said he was seeing the color changing eye shine, we went there multiple times, and it's like if you were to come visit me in Pennsylvania and you're like, I want to go see something weird, this is one of the places I would take you, because it's pretty dependable that you're going to see weird lights here. January, February is the best time before leaves are on the tree. You can see them other times, but you got to catch them. You'll be lucky to catch them. But we were seeing them, and they move and they change colors. And the first time I saw them, again, somebody had told me about them. And I went up there, and I was there for about a half an hour and didn't see anything. I was with a friend. And suddenly I saw it. It's just, I don't know, whether my eyes finally tuned into the darkness or whatever it was. I finally saw them. I said, wait, there they are. And I called him over, and he saw them too, and we're watching them. And they were changing colors and moving. They were moving like kind of within a prescribed area, though. It seemed like they would start and they would move up, and then they would go back to the starting place and they would move up again. So the guy was with, he happened to have a laser, a military grade 10-mile laser with him. I said, do me a favor, hit that light with that laser and see what happens. And he did it, and it took him a while to train in on it. And when he did, it would turn red and aperture out. And he did it again and again and again. It was so weird. We watched it several times. So that was kind of my introduction to the weirdness of this place. The longer we were there, the more these lights lit up. I didn't really feel like they were eye shine because they were changing colors and they were moving. Like I said, they were moving in a prescribed way, and there only seemed to be one most of the time. Now, we did look through binoculars, and it seemed like some of them that looked like one, when you look through binoculars, they kind of looked like two, but for the most part, I think it was just one light. So we weren't getting like pairs of lights like eyes. So I thought, well, I doubt these are eyes. I think these are something else weird. Then I took a story. This guy he was on Sasquatch Chronicles, and he came on Strange Familiars, my podcast as well. A guy named Jeremy from Texas, and he described pretty much the same thing I was seeing, these changing colored lights, but he saw them in the silhouette of a creature. And he said the lights were changing like Christmas lights. The eyes were lit up and changing colors like Christmas lights. And it was so similar to what I thought. I kind of rethought the whole thing. I was like, well, maybe it was eye shine. Maybe that's what I was seeing. Then I went back there again. You know, I'd been a few times since then, but I went back there again with my buddy Chad, who's most often comes out with me on these investigations and stuff. And it was very different when we were there with him. It was like a light show at a concert. It was like a laser show. It's like we were just seeing lights go off. It looked like, the only way I can describe it, at one point it looked like somebody was juggling flashlights, but you couldn't see the source of the beams. So it's just these lights just flipping through the woods. Really, really weird, and they never act like that before. Very different from any other time I'd seen them there. So we said, okay, we know about where in the woods these lights are. Let's hike in during the day and stay there till nightfall. So we go back, I don't know, this was, I think, around Memorial Day, I think. So leaves were on the tree at this point. So we thought, well, we'll just hike into where we see them, and maybe we'll see them, even though there's leaves on the trees. And we took a friend of ours who was very skeptical about this. He said, "Oh, you can take me in there. I'll tell you what they are." He's a forager. He's been in nature a lot, does tons of hiking and stuff. And he just couldn't believe what we were saying. So he's like, I will tell you what they are. Let's go. So he went with us. We hiked in while it was daylight, and we just sat there and waited till it turned dark. And these lights came up to us. When you talked about that witness on Sasquatch Chronicles, it said the lights would come up to them. I'd never had this before. I don't know if this was because we were sitting in the woods, we were kind of in their territory or what, but they actually came up to us. And the very, very odd thing was, at one particular one, I know we were looking at the same thing because my friend who was skeptical was so blown away. He was actually on his knees trying to grab this light. He was just blown away. He's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. And he was just completely fascinated. So he was on his knees trying to grab this thing. I'm looking at the same thing. And he described it as looking like a glowing ping pong ball. And I didn't see that at all. I'm looking at the same light. I saw what looked like a pen light, like an LED. We agreed on the color, but the size and shape of it, we were completely like we were seeing two different things.
That's insane.
Yeah, really, really weird, but made a believer out of him. And I had never seen them like that. They were almost playful or curious or something that night. They came so close to us. Very, very strange.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, here's Josh. Lo and behold, he's finally come in. Josh?
I am absolutely mortified.
Can I see a hall pass, please?
Well, I wrote it down as 8, and all day I've been like 9 p.m. I have this podcast. 9 p.m. I have this podcast. I'm like, no, I'm going to tell them I had car trouble. But then I'm like, no, Tim probably texted me, and my phone's upstairs, so he's going to call me out on that. So I was a complete fucking space cadet.
Oh, your excuse.
I am so sorry. I hope I didn't hold things up too much.
I called you a diva in the text, Josh, so.
I was doing something productive. I just completely sorry about that.
No, more power to you. At least you were doing something constructive.
Yeah, it was constructive, and I am a complete fucking space cadet.
Oh, don't worry about it. No.
How deep are you guys?
We have been going for a half hour, so hop on in.
Okay. Oh, so Timothy's the one that I have to reckon with because now I've thrown off his schedule.
Yes. Oh, right. I'm going to let you two guys hash it out at a later date.
All right.
Okay. So let's see. We were talking about balls of light and Bigfoot encounters. So what about? There's also accounts of lantern carrying wild men.
Sure.
Yeah. What are those about?
Boy, I wish I'd marked the stories in the book so I could read them, but there's a couple of them. There's one from America on an island off the coast of, is it Rhode Island? I want to say.
It's Block Island, yeah, off the coast of Rhode Island.
Yeah. Yeah, and people were seeing a wild man there, and they said he was carrying a swinging lantern. Now, was this actually a lantern he was carrying, or was there just a weird light along with the wild man that they were saying, oh, he's carrying a lantern? Yeah, I don't know, but there's other cases as well. Some people saw one along I believe along a power line, holding what they thought was a flashlight. There's a couple Yowie cases, I think, from Australia where they've seen them carrying lanterns or flashlights as well. So, lights and Bigfoot, they go hand in hand. One of my favorite accounts is there's one in the book where a guy shoots one, and where the bullet hole was, there's just a blue light emitting from the creature.
Wow. That's crazy. And there's also like a recurring theme of green flashes of light. Yeah, and that's really interesting because that goes across the board in the paranormal. But Greg and Dana from Hellier, if you're familiar with Hellier, and they run the Paranormal Museum as well. Mm-hmm. They had a story about Bigfooting, and they went out with these fellows who taught them the secret Bigfoot call, which Dana still knows. I asked her, it was at a paranormal conference. I was like, hey, do you still know that Bigfoot call? She's, oh yeah. Bunch of secret words strung together that supposedly will call Bigfoot in, but they had this pretty harrowing night, and they noticed there was a flash of green light before things really started popping off. I believe they had rocks thrown at them, and something bluff charged their camp and so forth. And Greg said he started looking back into his other records as far as these other investigations they've done, not Bigfoot, but ghosts and so forth, and started finding these accounts of these green flashes of light happening before things got particularly weird. Which is there were green flashes of light at the Sierra camp where they recorded those Sierra sounds around Moorhead and stuff. They had them there as well. So. And beforehand too, that makes it also lends to the idea that these lights are sort of transporting these things. I mean, it's all speculation. Of course. Maybe. Yeah. It's certainly an interesting idea. I mean, I love the interdimensional idea, but I'm very sort of agnostic on it because, again, we would need receipts. Of course. Go ahead, Josh.
An idea. I was just going to say an idea that I've been playing with, because like lights are sort of the
most common manifestation in all these paranormal phenomena. Like everything has odd light phenomena attached to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I've been sort of wondering, if a lot of ifs coming your way. So here we go. But if some of these encounters are caused by an endogenous release of DMT that facilitates interaction with the other, if DMT comes from the pineal gland, then it's stimulated by light, presumably. And I kind of wonder if there isn't some sort of special spectrum, because you hear this all the time, right? That the UFO doesn't quite look right. The light looks sickly. The light looks kind of strange. I kind of wonder if there's not a specific spectrum, and that's like the pure unvarnished form of the other, and it has this specific spectrum of light that sort of triggers that release of endogenous DMT, and from there it sort of decides, it looks into our brains and decides what, it wants to pull out of the wardrobe. Am I going to be Bigfoot today? Am I going to be a fairy today, or a UFO?
I like it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a great connection to make.
Or not, I mean.
Well, we're all just spitballing here, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, could the light generate the release of the DMT? Could the light be the spark? In other words.
Yeah, I mean, I should think so, because the pineal gland is where melatonin is produced, and that's triggered by light. The pineal gland is literally sort of the third eye. It is a vestigial eye organ. In fact, some reptiles still have that sort of a pineal eye, like the tuatara from, I think, New Zealand. So that could be the mechanism that we see, and it would explain why everything seems to be a ball of light or transform out of or into a ball of light, as opposed to going down that sort of transportive avenue, which I don't know how Tim feels about dimensions, but I've kind of got a grumpy old man rant that I do about dimensions these days.
Yeah, go on.
Well, it was just people. I kind of push back on anyone who says that things are interdimensional, or or that they know what a dimension is, because don't let anybody tell you that. Nobody knows what a dimension is. I mean, they're conceptualized, but if you really live in Flatland, nobody can tell you what that finger touching the paper really looks like in those other dimensions. It's not, as Terence McKenna would say, it's not stranger than you imagine. It's stranger than you can imagine, right? Or maybe
absolutely.
That was Leary. And to me, the way that people throw around dimensions these days is just a complete remodel of a medieval otherworld model. It's just it's fairyland, it's Tir na Nog, it's the afterlife, it's all these different things just repackaged in a new way to sound sciencey, and it really isn't very sciencey at all. I imagine that if we could actually go into another dimension or see things from other dimensions, it would be like a complete Lovecraftian mental derangement that you'd suffer if you didn't just outright explode or something.
For sure. Have either of you done DMT?
I have not. I really want to at some point before I shuffle off the mortal coil.
Tim?
Tim?
I've had the offer, but puking, I'm not a good puker.
What? I've never heard of puking with DMT.
Well, ayahuasca.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. I meant like the scrape the toad poison off of the glass and smoke it.
Yeah, no, I've salvia, but not DMT.
Mm-hmm. What were you going to say, Josh?
Oh, I was just going to say, and that's one thing that I will gladly cede all quote unquote expertise to, is that I have not had these experiences for a couple of different reasons. But also, at the end of the day, a lot of it's the fact that I'm a scaredy cat. So, if people want to, bust my chops for that, I think that's a really legitimate hole in my armor, so to speak.
So I shouldn't dose your tea at the next conference we're at.
Oh man, I would. Yeah, if you want to be my sitter all night, go ahead, Tim.
Well, at least Josh, you're man enough to admit that you're a scaredy cat.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
What about reports of what people have called ultrasound attacks connected to Bigfoot encounters?
Infrasound?
Yeah, that's what I mean. No, not where they try and figure out what sex your baby is, but
Well, no, that's actually a really prescient segue, because I think it's kind of that same sort of catch-all, right, Tim? I mean, it's
Yeah,
not
I
to
mean,
take
that's
your
it's it's kind of a joke at this point, but it's like almost like when people from the flesh and blood Bigfoot community acknowledge the weird stuff, it's always infrasound, whatever it was. No matter what happened, it was infrasound that caused it.
Well, when they do that huff, and that's when people start getting dizzy and sort of feeling sick to their stomachs. Do you think that that's what that is? Do you think
No.
What do you think it is?
I
Bullshit.
think when you encounter this stuff, I think it's very. There's no way to prepare for it. I go out there looking for it, and when it happens, it's unbelievable, and it's affecting in incredible ways, and you don't know each time. The best you can do is tell yourself, like, I'm going to be okay. I'm going. This is all right. This is what I came here for, and I'm okay. And in a sense, you can sort of mitigate it a little bit, but you really don't know what you're going to get and how it is going to react. It's very unpredictable, and if there is an us component, and I'll allow that there very well could be. We are removed enough, at least in my experience, that I don't feel like I have any control over it, what I'm going to see or what happens or anything. I can only control my reaction to it, or try to. So I think if it's so bizarre and it's so not like anything else, that I think when people get these feelings, it's because you're literally encountering something other. This is something that should not be there, and I think it's such a shock to your system that absolutely sometimes you're going to get nauseous and weak kneed, and et cetera, et cetera. So I really don't think these things are using infrasound, but again, I could be wrong.
But I think that there is something interesting to sort of unpack from that, which is these, a lot of times there are these descriptions of, in addition to sort of the Oz effect where everything gets really silent, you'll also hear stories about this odd buzzing or humming preceding Bigfoot encounters. And that, to me, sounds just like stuff you'll hear. Well, you hear it kind of everywhere. You hear that same sort of humming preceding near-death experiences and fairy encounters and alien abductions and, of course, psychedelic trips like we were just talking about. So I kind of wonder if that isn't an attempt to describe some sort of vocalization that might not kind of have an ability to put people into an altered state of consciousness, sort of binaural beat style. It sounds a lot like a description that Al Berry has in his book Bigfoot, where he talks about this old Japanese monk that he heard one time who was doing this humming, singing chant. And I looked into it, and apparently multiphonic singing, throats, like Tuvan throat singing is what people call it a lot nowadays, was practiced among the Ainu until like 1976. So it would have had that overlap with Al Berry. And I kind of think that maybe he was describing Tuvan throat singing, because there's another witness that I found who described Bigfoot vocalizing like a didgeridoo, and that's what took out his kid. His kid's knees buckled, and he just went comatose because of the sound. And I'm kind of wondering if there's not some sort of altered state aspect to this with that sort of didgeridoo-like sound, because didgeridoos, are used in some, Australian Aboriginal practices for visiting the Dreamtime. And I'd be remiss if I wouldn't tee Timothy up here, who caught something sounding especially like that sort of multiphonic singing at an on-site interview where he was interviewing a Bigfoot witness.
Please tell.
Indeed, yeah. Witness called me up and said he'd meet me at the place where he had these several experiences, and this is actually less than a mile from where he had his experience as the crow flies. But he wanted to take me there because there was a story of a woman in white spirit, which we talk about in Volume 1. These women in white that are often seen with or around these wild men. So there's this story of this woman in white spirit seen at this pond And I was interviewing him there, and he was telling the story of the legend. I did not hear this while I was there with him, and he didn't either. But when I got back, and it was a very windy day, it was very cold, and it was like March, and I didn't wear my coat out of the car. I thought I'd be okay. The temperature was fine, but the wind was just cutting right through me. So I remember I was very uncomfortable. So I probably wasn't listening super close to what was going on around me. I was probably trying to get the interview done and get to my coat. But nevertheless, I had no recollection of the sound, until I went back to interview him. I could hear something underneath us for the entire interview. And I caught, a couple seconds of it when we weren't talking. And it sounds like this very, very low, almost tube and throat singing kind of thing. And it's just there during the whole time we're talking. Wow. It's there in the background. Really, really wild. And, it's neither one of us, because we're having a whole other conversation.
Interesting. Yeah, and there's lots of associations often in the same conversations as psychedelics about tones of voice, of people's voice, or vocalizations that people do. And I'm thinking of Terence McKenna and his brother Dennis at their experiment in La Chorrera, where they try and hit this certain tone that will sort of give them access to this sort of like the Akashic records of the planet Earth. So it makes me think of that, like, perhaps there are tones that can be reached that are maybe not even audible to the naked ear, that can affect our states of mind.
Well, I mean, not only that, but also, the Icaros that are employed by ayahuasqueros during ayahuasca sessions. Yeah, I'm really interested in sort of pushing cryptozoology into this territory, because I've always said that, cryptozoologists will be the last, unexplained Fortean discipline to embrace the consciousness aspect, but they are going to be a distant, seventh to get to the field of psychedelics and cryptozoology encounters. I mean, I don't think that people have really talked about that at all. And that's sort of very much in vogue with talking about UFOs and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that the Bigfoot community is so plagued by materialists in one aspect.
Yeah, I sort of made the comparison in volume, I think it was volume 1, it isn't this volume actually, about how, if you've got this embodiment of the trickster archetype, and you can really sort of look at the way that Protestantism sort of disenchanted Christianity in a lot of ways compared to Catholicism. And this is something that George P. Hansen talks about in his Trickster and the Paranormal. And he says, disenchantment, Protestantism, enchantment, Catholicism. And I think you can sort of draw similar parallels to, disenchantment, cryptozoologists, enchantment, paranormalists.
Yeah.
I feel like cryptozoologists really, the materialist cryptozoologists, which is by far most of the people that are interested in this, really do have a sort of, I know they don't mean to. I know they're good-spirited, but they do have sort of a disenchanting quality to them. I mean, we're dealing with something that's, I think Bigfoot, in whatever that is, does exist, and I think that it's absolutely miraculous. And to dial that back and say, I want it to be a big monkey, is so reductive, because this is speaking to us on such a really primal level.
It's with Bigfoot, with these these Bigfoot guys, you tend to get two waves of change. They either, well, now some start with it's a flesh and blood creature and stay there forever and there can't be anything else. But some of these people, there's some of these investigators that really, really got into the weird stuff in the 70s, and then over time they shed all that. And now these are some of the most, vocalistic people that, it's just a creature and we'll find it someday. There's a breeding population, blah, 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 blah. But then you have your other people who get into it. And this is the case with me where I think, well, wouldn't it be cool for there to be this creature out there? And I start looking at all the stories and what evidence we do have. And I start going, well, I can't make this work as a normal animal. I can't make it work. And then, you get more and more woo. Now, some of them tend to go like really woo, migrating 260,000 Bigfoot souls from the planet
Zorth.
whatever. Yeah. My hope is to, stay somewhere in the middle, acknowledge the weird stuff, and also, like I said, be agnostic about the causes of it.
Yeah.
Is it interdimensional? I don't know. It's a cool idea, but I don't know. I don't know. We need the evidence to prove that. But it certainly is a weird phenomena, and there's so much weirdness associated with it that I can't ignore it. I think a lot of the flesh and blood guys do. They choose to ignore it. I was told that anyone who sees anything crazy along with Bigfoot is either lying or crazy. And I just, if you're going to believe the witness when they say they saw an 8-foot tall monkey man in the woods, but you're going to say no, they were crazy when they saw a UFO in the same place the next day.
Exactly.
You can't do that.
Come on,
you
dude.
That's my threshold right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I may have said this on our last interview, but it's natural to start off from the standpoint that UFOs are little green scientists. And it's natural, I think I've stayed here a little bit longer than some people, but it's natural to think that ghosts are dead people. But once you really start pulling back the layers, you start realizing how honestly much richer the possibilities are in a lot of these different topics. And I was that way with Bigfoot. Part of me is going to grieve for the rest of my life for the giant monkey in the woods, because, there's something that, we can catch it. There will be an end goal. And it lets you sound less crazy when you present all the admittedly fantastic physical evidence that we have. Evidence that conforms to primate biology. I get that. That's really sexy stuff, really compelling stuff. To this day, if somebody's interested in Bigfoot, I still press a copy of Jeff Meldrum's book into their hands because it's great evidence. But at the end of the day, so much of what we base our, quote unquote beliefs or our suspicions on about Bigfoot are from eyewitness testimony, and you have to believe the witness. You really do, because they're the source for all this stuff that we talk about.
You know what I say about Jeff Meldrum when people ask me about Jeff Meldrum?
What?
I say, that is a guy who knows feet. He knows feet. He knows primate foot anatomy better. I could study the rest of my life on primate foot anatomy and never get close to what he knows about primate foot anatomy. That guy knows primate foot anatomy incredibly well. Trust what he says on footprints. Trust what he says on primate anatomy. But he doesn't know shit about Bigfoot. And neither do I. Neither do I. No.
Yeah.
No.
What's interesting about a podcast like Sasquatch Chronicles, which keeps coming up in this exchange, is that there's so many stories of people coming from all different places and all different walks of life that you get to see all of the overlaps and the recurring themes. And I think that that's really fascinating because a lot of this quote unquote far out stuff happens again and again and again, which...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Wessel pointed out himself, and I think I got this from him. The idea that when a hunter sees one in the woods, it's and it just walks by him, or somebody has a roadside crossing. Of course, they think it's a natural animal. That's what it looks like. That's what it behaved like. But when you have people who have them on their property and they have these repeat encounters with them again and again and again, it always gets weird. Always gets weird. They'll always have lights. They'll always have other stuff with them. They're some of my favorite cases to talk to people with, because it's amazing. Because most people, again, they start out like this is some kind of creature, but you talk to them for a while about the Bigfoot stuff, and usually I spend better part of a day with witnesses, and then eventually you go, okay, what else weird is happening here? And without fail, they will say, oh, well, my house is haunted, and there's lights. I see, UFOs, over the trees there, and this stuff, and they don't think it's related, because why would it be related? But when you hear this again and again and again, it's like, yeah, there's something to it. There's something to it.
Well, and to sort of riff on Sasquatch Chronicles, I mean, I may have said this to Wes when we spoke, because he was sort of the last check mark on my podcast that I listened to that I'm now a guest on, bingo card. And I was sort of over the moon that I got that opportunity. Thank you, Timothy, because I don't think it would happen without you. But when you listen to those early episodes of that podcast, it was like the most materialist interpretation of Bigfoot ever.
Oh yeah.
And and I always thought it was really, they'd actively make fun of people who said anything strange and call them flute players. That was their go-to insult. And I remember at one point, they talked about, basically he had missing time with his Bigfoot encounter. Like, it's a great example of missing time with his Bigfoot encounter, Wes's. And I was like, that's so disingenuous. And I'll be damned. Over time, Wes has come around on strange Bigfoot. I think one of the things, was him seeing some of those anomalous lights near his sighting, same area. And I will call out character when I see it in these communities, because it manifests so rarely. And changing your opinion, especially when you built a reputation on that, is amazing. And he definitely, as he sort of assimilated the evidence, he says, "Oh, this is stranger. Like, it might still be a big monkey, but it's like the weirdest big monkey ever, weirdest primate ever."
And like, knowing Wes, outside of the podcast world, that's troubling to him. He'd much rather it be just some kind of animal. But he's followed, with what evidence we have, he's followed these stories the same way that we have. And it's just led him to this place where, he can't think of it that simply anymore. I'm fine with it not being a monkey. I like the idea that it's just sort of something that we can't quite wrap our minds around. One of the many, many elements that fascinates me about it is that it possesses these properties with these encounters and all the experiences that people have. It would be different if it was some sort of, something that resembled some advanced alien race who had, was carrying some kind of little technology, like some box that shot out crazy lights and, had this, seemed like an advanced sort of race of entity. But the fact that all this crazy stuff happens and that this intelligence that seems to shine through comes from this big lunk of a hairy hulk that just lumbers through the forest, that dichotomy really fascinates me. Well, the wild man has been with us forever. As we've always had a wild man. Every culture has one. I think Bigfoot is our modern wild man.
Sure.
It's changed a little bit over time, but a lot of the qualities are the same.
I mean, that would be the irony, right? That Bigfoot is like the apex of human potential, right?
Yeah.
Like, what if all these miraculous abilities and associated attendant phenomena aren't like what we all have within us? We just are so divorced from being in the wilderness and from nature that we just can't harness that. I mean, and you can draw a comparison to, ascetics in different traditions who went into the wilderness and sort of became feralized in a way. I was thinking the other day that you could almost make a case for John the Baptist being a Bigfoot.
Certainly a wild man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly has aspects of that archetype.
It's like getting away from the consensus reality that's constantly telling you, what are the limits of what is possible and what isn't. They're not a part of that at all. Yeah. So, yeah, it's amazing. A lot of a recurring topic that comes up in the book is these telepathic exchanges between Bigfoot and different people that encounter them. And then on top of that, the Bigfoot explaining that their race exists in a parallel dimension. I was totally fascinated by that.
Yeah, it's got to be the most in a 2-volume work of controversial Bigfoot topics. I think mindspeak might be like the most controversial topic. But again, it was when I compiled. I'd have some examples and some discussion, and then in every chapter, more or less every chapter, I'd have some bullet points of different examples, and it was like shooting fish in a barrel. Of people talking to wild men, telepathically from all corners of the world, to the extent that like I was ready to send it in, and someone wrote me on Facebook and said, "Hey Josh, I have this story," and I'd known the person he's a frequent poster on the Strange Familiars Facebook page, and he wrote me and said, "Hey Josh, I have this example of Bigfoot telling me to look over here," and I looked over there and I saw it, and he described this entire story. And yeah, it's interesting. There's often Bigfoot overshares. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to hear about your extinct dying race that's come to us from another dimension, but I guess I'm here. But yeah, there are examples of that. There was one really bonkers one in Oregon in like 1996 where this tan Bigfoot told this woman that he was part of this race that called the Melkoi, and they were here to investigate human emotion and reproduction. And then, like, as soon as the family shows up, he just like runs away. And what I think is perhaps most interesting about a lot of these Bigfoot mindspeak encounters, because like my jam is the comparative Forteana, right? That's my jam, comparative paranormalism. Are the comparisons that you can make to those statements and some of the stuff that you see from the UFO abduction and contactee literature, especially that sort of environmental message, almost like Bigfoot are missionaries of animism, to sort of adopt a phrase from Simon Harvey Wilson, who was a late abduction researcher. You see that, you see this sort of like altruistic, gentle scolding of you for not taking care of the environment. And I kind of have wondered if that's not why Bigfoot has chosen to show up when he has so strongly in popular culture. Again, I don't know if I'm repeating myself from our last talk, but
I don't think so.
The image of Bigfoot is as ubiquitous or more so than like the gray alien head was in the 90s. Because I remember you used to see that everywhere. Mm-hmm. And now, like, anytime I go out in my car, I see somebody with a Bigfoot bumper sticker or something. It's everywhere. And I wonder what it is in the society and in our culture, especially in the Americas, that's propelling that forward. And I suspect that this archetype or this avatar or guardian of the forest, whatever you want to call it, is emerging at a time when we are so divorced from what reality is and from being in the natural world. I kind of think that might have something to do with it. I don't think that necessarily pollution is at its apex and he's coming up like the toxic Avenger to break necks.
I think more of the Lorax, maybe.
Yeah, Lorax is a Littlefoot, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think that's sort of it sort of crops up in our subconscious whenever we start to feel guilty about not spending enough time in nature, which we have been horrible about.
Sure.
Well, that mirrors my theory about the changing wild man. So
yes,
if you look at wild men through time, in medieval times, they tend to be these kind of wizards of the forest. They were these wise kind of wizards. Merlin, for example, had a wild man phase where he stripped his clothes off and went to the woods and became wild. Some accounts have him even growing hair on his body. He learned to talk to the animals. But certainly a wizard of the forest. But the wild man of medieval times, was wild and dangerous, but could also be this this wild figure. This it had knowledge that it could impart. And if you move up through time and you get to the 1800s, and I've collected, some of my books are just wholly newspaper accounts of wild man sightings from the 1800s and early 1900s. And many of these accounts have these sort of like, they're still wild men. They're still big and covered in hair, but sometimes they'll be wearing, raggy clothes. And I used to say that was the prudish Victorian newspaper editor that was, throwing clothes on these things, whether they had clothes or not. They couldn't stand the idea of a naked wild man running around. So they said, oh, no, he was wearing raggy clothes that were torn up. But over time, I've kind of, adjusted my thinking on that. So you get these stories that they're wearing, torn up clothes and sometimes carrying like an old rusty musket that won't fire, or a broken axe or something. They have these sort of suggested implements of mankind, and as you move up to modern times, you get this very, very wild, Sasquatch, the very, very wild man. It's very animalistic. It doesn't have any of those trappings left. While there are instances, of course, of it imparting wisdom via mindspeak and so forth, it's the vast majority of the accounts are this just scary wild thing in the forest. And it's it hit me one day. It's like the UFOs are always outpace us technologically. They're always like beyond what we have. The airships came before we really had airships, not too long before, but the airships accounts in the 1800s, and then by they turned into these sort of like Art Deco flying machines, and then by the 70s, they started getting the black triangles right before we started getting the stealth fighters and stuff. And they always just ahead of us. And nowadays they're like tend to be a lot of like amorphous blobs of light, jellyfish ships and stuff people see. So it's always like they're just ahead of us technologically. And the wild man almost takes the opposite. Like it gets wilder over time. It gets farther and further away from us, and wilder and more primitive in a sense. And I've wondered that if like as we've gotten further from nature, if by necessity our wild man has gotten wilder and over time.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting point. Sort of like balancing the scales. They're on the opposite extreme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But on the fringes of where we're at. Yeah, I like that. Are you good to go, Tim, until the top of the hour?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, fantastic. How is the field of cryptoanthropology pertinent to Bigfoot?
Well, that's I don't know if that term existed before I came up with it, but I thought that cryptozoology was is really the study of animals, and even amongst the flesh and blood people, for a while there, about 10 years ago, they would you heard Gigantopithecus a lot, this giant ape, and that's fallen out of fashion even among the flesh and blood people, and you'll hear no, this is a hominid. This is a some sort of relict hominid. That there's great hope amongst the flesh and blooders with this new discovery of the dragon man skull in China, because it happens to be a little bit bigger than a regular human. So they're really beating the drum for that. To be some connection to Bigfoot in the fossil record, but remains to be seen. I doubt it personally, but we'll see. But in any case, if we're studying this hominid, well, the cryptozoologists need to get out. Like, this isn't an animal. This is a person. So we need cryptoanthropology. We need to be looking at this as an anthropologist. We need to be looking at, folklore and the way socially these things, react to us and impact our society and our folklore in the way, perhaps that we might be influencing it and so forth, and as another human species. So I just think it's a more appropriate term for if you want to study this thing, like cryptozoologists, they study animals. I think we need cryptoanthropologists study humans, study this whatever this alternate hominid species is, if that's what they are.
I like it. I would take that for your program for sure. I'd have that certificate on my wall, definitely.
I might teach it. There you go.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
I got my doctorate of cryptoanthropology from Tim Renner University.
From Strange But Familiars University, yeah. SFU.
Yeah.
I like it. I can see the merch already. Okay, to kind of jump into a different area of all this, what about Men in Black encounters after Bigfoot encounters? What do you think the connection between those two things is?
Well, I only found one Man in Black account proper.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm sure that there are more that exist, but I ran into one. It's a guy in Florida. He was collecting Bigfoot evidence. I think he had some footprint casts, and he had some hair samples and stuff. And one day, somebody knocks on his door, and he opens up, and it's very typical Men in Black, guys in black suits and fedoras and stuff. And they come in and they say, we need your evidence. We're going to take it and have it analyzed. And he gives it over to him. And of course, he never sees him again. and very intimidating, and kind of suggested that he should stop looking into the phenomenon. And I think that the next day he saw some like black helicopters or something flying over the area, and it's just this kind of odd but very kind of typical Men in Black thing. However, there are accounts going back as far as the 1970s of the sort of Bigfoot community equivalent to Men in Black, which is this one guy in particular who shows up. People tend to describe him like a big biker or a big lumberjack. He often wears a plaid shirt, which, if you listen to Strange Familiars, is very interesting. Mm-hmm. But he shows up, and he's often with a guy that's they kind of do a good cop, bad cop thing. He's with another guy who's kind of dressed more professionally in a suit or shirt and tie or et cetera. And they tend to show up to witnesses who have either collected what I call, first-class relic evidence, hair, blood, scat, something like that, or people who have had particularly intense encounters, or both. And they will intimidate the witnesses, and they will tell them, you are not to talk about this. You're not to tell anyone you saw anything. If you do tell them you saw a bear, that's what you say, et cetera, et cetera. They often either outright claim or suggest they're with a government organization like the Department of the Interior. Same guys, by description, are seen all over the country for decades. And it's the kind of thing where Sasquatch Chronicles started putting it together, and they started taking all these accounts, but I started finding them other places too, where people were talking about these guys, and it's always the same two guys. And so they sort of act like the Man in Black equivalent for the Bigfoot community.
Let's just say that they do have something to do with the government. What would be the motivations of the government in regards to Bigfoot or Bigfoot evidence, do you think?
Well, they don't want us to know that they're out there. I don't.
Why, Tim?
Yeah. This gets into conspiracy, flesh and blood conspiracy theory territory. Maybe again going back 10 years or so, it was like, well, they would destroy the logging industry. Mm-hmm. like they would. If they knew they were out there, they would tell the logging industry they had to stop because of species. So you can't stop the logging industry. To which I say, nothing stops capitalism. Yeah, nothing stops the wheels of capitalism. It would not stop anything. Mm-hmm. Might slow it down for a half a minute, but nothing stops capitalism. So I think that argument can go out the window. Why would the government care that to know about it and have us not know about it or not talk about it? I have no clue. No clue.
I mean, I suspect that it's probably a lot like the Men in Black phenomena, which, I mean, I have a hard time swallowing that as being governmental. I mean, it definitely very much seems to be, a part and parcel with the phenomena itself. And I've always sort of found it interesting that, what sort of authority figure would appeal to, a ufologist versus what sort of authority figure would appeal to an outdoorsman, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got the big, lumberjack or biker guy providing muscle.
So what, if you don't think that they are governmental, what then you said part and parcel of the encounter? What do you think that they would represent?
I mean, if you catch me on a good day, I might say shape-shifted Sasquatch, right? I mean,
okay, is this a good day?
Well, Timothy has a story that of a witness he talked to, and it sounds absolutely like a Bigfoot encounter up until the last minute when they look in their, the tail light says this thing lifts up the car and it's wearing a red flannel shirt. And you also have, it's not super common, but there is a not insignificant subset of Bigfoot stories where Bigfoot is seen wearing all sorts of clothing. And, that sort of ties into, the old lycanthropy traditions and the idea that these things are sort of shape-shifting. And there's a lot of indigenous lore that says that these things can shape-shift as well. There's one account from, I think it's in this book as well, about these Pennsylvanians who are doing a four-wheeler circuit around this woods, and it's like, I don't know, 50 degrees, right? And it's muddy. And they see a Bigfoot step across the path and pass into the forest. They're like, "Hey, I know where it will come out on this circuit." So they get back on their four-wheelers and they go and they try to catch it. When they get there, there's like a 50s greaser who's standing there, in a white T-shirt, no jacket. So it's cold, but he's smoking this cigarette that doesn't smell and doesn't cause smoke or something like that. And he has a conversation with him. He's like, "Oh, I just live over there." And he's wearing these boat shoes that are just white and immaculate, even though it's muddy. And he's like, "I just live over there." And they take their eyes off him for a second. They turn right back around. He's completely gone. Wow. Now, there's nothing in that story that says that's, this forest spirit that is Bigfoot shapeshifted into a greaser archetype, right? But it's definitely highly suggestive that that's something like that is going on. And I kind of think you might be seeing something similar with the two gentlemen that come up and harass witnesses. It's almost like a immuno response by the phenomena.
And now you've blown up my next book, Fonzie as the Wild Man Archetype.
Hey,
sit on it. Yeah. Okay, and the subtitle of this book is Evidence. What's there's the recurring theme also of disappearing evidence.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Tell us some instances of that.
Well, I mean, this happens again throughout the paranormal. So if you want to have a board where you're Always Sunny, Charlie from Always Sunny board where you're making all the connections and have the yarn and so forth. This would be a good place for it because this does happen across the board. But in Bigfoot, so we have again what I call primary relics. I kind of use the metaphor of Christian relics because it's sort of an easy metaphor. So primary relics in Christianity are something that came from the body of the saint, hair, blood, bone, etc. And we have some primary relics supposedly from Bigfoot. All of those, every single one of them, is inconclusive. All of them that have been tested. Sometimes you'll come back with things like unknown primate or something like that, and then they'll get retested, and another result will come up. It'll be a different result. Usually when they're tested a second time, it'll be like, oh no, that's just a person, or that was a raccoon or something. So the primary relics is almost like, yeah, we have them, but they're really inconclusive. The best evidence we have will be called secondary relics, something the creature touched. So footprints. We have really, really wonderful casts of footprints that, show, from, again, experts like Meldrum, fantastic detail and things in these casts that you'd have to be an expert on the level of Meldrum to fake these things. So, I can't believe someone else is out there, like another, person with Meldrum level expert is out there faking these footprints. So, they certainly show something. So that's our best evidence is, secondary relics. So just things that this thing has touched. The primary evidence, once again, it's all inconclusive. DNA, all inconclusive. There's been two major studies. The Melba Ketchum study, if you listen to other geneticists, is very problematic. If you take her at her word, let's say she was right, what her study shows is that this thing has DNA unlike any other creature on planet Earth. So even if she is right, and again, most other geneticists say like her study's flawed, but let's say she's right. Let's say she got it right. Whatever it is so different from any other animal that we might as well be talking about something that's paranormal here because there's nothing else like it. So, there's your DNA evidence. So you get down to, these primary relics. So people are, have hair and they send it away. It goes missing like an incredible amount of time, not just one or two cases. There's a woman, Cindy Dosen, who does hair analysis. I think she's in Canada. And my friend Tobe had collected some hair from a very, very interesting cast that he cast what appears to be Sasquatch knee prints. And he wanted to send her some hair to have her analyze it. And she said, make sure you don't send it all and make sure you send it in a way that's trackable because hair samples go missing all the time.
Crazy.
That was happening back when Stan Gordon has a case in his book where a guy collected hair samples, sent it to him, never showed up. The guy called Stan. Stan said he didn't get it. He sent it again, never showed up. Guy eventually ends up hand delivering the samples to Stan, because they just would go missing in the mail. Now, is this a government conspiracy? Does the government know you're sending Bigfoot hair through the mail? Do they have a Bigfoot hair detector, in every post office, and they're grabbing it? Like, no. Yeah, I think something else is going on. I think something far stranger is going on. These, blood samples, even in Melba Ketchum's study, she said she accused other labs of changing her samples when she sent them to them. A bunch of samples went missing, and I believe, I may be wrong about this, I believe that people said that they never got their samples back from her, even though she sent them back. So they would send samples to her, she'd send them back, and they never received them. I can't imagine she'd have any reason to keep them, and I would definitely take her at her word and assume that, whatever happens to this stuff, it just tends to go missing. There's another story of an investigator with Stan Gordon. I think it was the same guy who was trying to send him the hair samples. He came home one day and his entire, he kept a whole file on these Bigfoot cases he was researching, and the whole file was gone. So all of it just gone. And he had other stuff in the file cabinet, personal records, financial records, etc. None of that was touched, just the Bigfoot file was gone. Now my wife, wonderful skeptic that she is, says, well, what do you think the most logical reason for that is? I said, well, the most logical answer for that is his wife probably threw it away. She probably hated the fact that he was investigating Bigfoot, and she dumped it when she was there. And she says, that's right. And I said, to that I say, doesn't matter. The end result is the evidence is still missing. It does not matter how it goes missing. It's missing. It's gone. Every Bigfoot body. Now, people have claimed to shoot Bigfoot many, many times over the years, from the 1800s up until modern times. Every single one, 100% of them, not 99%, not 99.9%, every single time the bodies are gone. They are not here. We cannot research them. People talk about the Minnesota Iceman, which Josh did a little bit of a deeper dive than I did on that, but I talk about it in the missing evidence as well. And a lot of people assert that there was an original Minnesota Iceman that was real, and it was replaced by a model at some point. Well, then you ask, well, where's this original then? Well, we don't know. It's in some collector's, has it in a cold storage warehouse somewhere, but we don't know, but we know there was one. Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter then. If we can't access it, if we can't study it, it is missing. It's gone. So the method of its removal does not matter to me. It's the fact that it's missing is the sort of thing to look at as far as the overall view of the phenomenon. Yeah,
such an enigma, just constantly eluding our grasp.
Yeah, I mean, bones go missing. There's a bit in my chapter about a guy found a huge skull. He was a doctor. He was on a Boy Scout expedition, but he recognized the skull as being humanoid but not human, and ended up sending it to a forensics guy, who then sends it to UCLA, and this is in the 60s, and by 74 or so, when Al Berry's writing his book, his Bigfoot book, it's gone. No one can find it. And then you get these contradictory stories where some people at UCLA sort of remember it, other people don't have any remembrance at all of it. It's missing. So again, does it matter if one of these researchers took it for their own collection, or somebody decided it doesn't fit the mainstream science profile, so they hid it somewhere? It doesn't matter. It's gone. It's missing. We cannot study it. And it happens again and again with again, across the paranormal, but my focus, at least in this book, was on Bigfoot.
Wow, crazy. Well, we're kind of drawing in on the allotted time, but Josh, Tim and I sort of discussed this during the first half hour before you peeped in. I'm going to pull a Wes Germer on you and ask you what you think Bigfoot is.
Oh, well, I hope that if you ask me in another 6 months, that it'll change, because it's changed since I wrote this book with Tim.
Yeah.
I was kind of on, quote unquote, the archetype bandwagon, whatever that means, right? An archetype. And I still think there's a lot of value to that. I think that,
I think there was only ever 2 people in that bandwagon, John.
Well, sorry, you know what I mean? The archetype jalopy, or whatever it is.
Unicycle.
But, yeah. I think that there's something to that. I think that I really haven't abandoned that idea, because I think that archetypes are like the source code of the universe, and if anybody wants to come back and push at you and say, oh, that's just a bunch of highfalutin Jungian nonsense. Well, if you can be on board with, the idea of simulation theory, you should be on board with the idea of archetypes, because it's not that far off. It's not that far of a stretch, in my opinion. Anyway,
Sure.
Neither here nor there. But I think that in accordance with where my next project is taking me, to paraphrase Ann Struber about the UFO phenomena, has something to do with what we call death. There's a pretty extensive chapter in volume 1 that details similarities between Bigfoot and ghosts. Whatever that means, whatever ghosts are. But I am seeing some more parallels that are sort of making me wonder. And I don't necessarily mean, that sort of reductive, oh, it must be a Neanderthal ghost. Although I find that idea attractive in some ways. I think all the paranormal has something to do with this process that we find ourselves at the end of our lives. And that's about as comfortable as I feel getting into right now.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I'm being coy, but because I just haven't formulated my thoughts anymore.
Sure.
But I think it's something. It's an archetype that's somehow a facilitator for that process, and like almost like a signifier or a dog ear for that process in some way.
Cool. So this is part of a new book that you're working on?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous.
It's viewing the paranormal through just death. So it's in a roundabout way. It kind of became Josh's theory of everything. So yeah, we'll see. It's going to be giant, and no one's going to want to read it. But I
will.
Okay, one person will read it. There you go.
It's the first book in years Josh has written without me.
It is. I forgot how to write, because I was, like, what's this process feel like? So I had to dust off all my old books and try to find my way again. But anyway, that's where I am, and that's not a very satisfying answer, but that's as close as I can get right now in this moment. And like I said, I should hope that in 6 months it would be a different answer.
Fabulous. When do you expect that book to release? Next year?
I'm about halfway through. He's a chunky boy. He's about 85,000 words right now.
Wow.
So then that's halfway through. So I should probably have it wrapped up by September, and then bigger book means more time to edit and whatnot. So probably the beginning of next year.
Fabulous.
But I'm excited about that.
I look forward to it. What about you, Tim? What do you have in the works?
I got a book. It's going to be a very slim volume that's coming out hopefully by the fall, because the idea is for it to coincide with the 300th episode of Strange Familiars.
Oh, cool.
It's called The Witch Cloud, and that's about all I can say about it right now. So that would be heavily illustrated, and unfortunately, like 100 pages or less. It's, like I said, it's a pretty slim volume,
mm-hmm.
but a lot of illustrations. I think a good book. It's more of a return to form for me, if anybody's familiar with my first book, Beyond the Seventh Gate, kind of looking at local legends and kind of picking them apart and seeing how it fits within the general paranormal. I do some more of that in this. And then I'm working on a much bigger project that has to do with Pennsylvania folklore. And, eventually I'm going to get back to Bigfoot, but we spent a lot of time and effort on these 2 volumes, and I just needed a little Bigfoot vacation.
Yeah. Sure.
As far as writing goes.
Yeah.
I'm still out there researching, still, taking reports whenever I can, still talking to witnesses whenever I can. But just as far as like writing books, I just was like, all right, let me back away from this for a minute, but I'll get back there.
Lovely. Fantastic. So where can the listeners find you guys and your work online?
Strangefamiliars.com is where my podcast is, but all that contact information there goes to me, and you can find links to like my Etsy shop for my artwork, and my music links are there. Everything's there at strangefamiliars.com.
And you, Josh?
JoshuaCutchin.com, JoshuaCutchin. And I should have a release like imminently for a collection of essays that I have contributed to and edited about fairies on film. Ooh. With artwork by our dear Tim Renner for the cover as well. So Fantastic. That should be dropping soon. More info on that coming out.
Very cool. Very cool. That's exciting. Well, guys, thank you both so much for agreeing to be on the show again. I thoroughly enjoyed both volumes. I secretly wish there was about 5 volumes. But
we might could arrange that.
Yeah, cool. Fantastic. In about 5 years. No, they're fantastic books, very well written, of course, very well illustrated. I just couldn't put them down. I blazed through them, and they were incredible. So I highly recommend them. I'll have the links to all of that in the episode notes. And yeah, let's do this again sometime in the not too distant future.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Tim and Josh.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll keep in touch.
All right.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
All right. Farewell. If you've liked what you've heard and would like to contribute to The Melt, there are a few ways that you can do that. The most tangible would be financially. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and there you will find ways that you can contribute for as little as $3 a month. This will give you access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. Contributing financially will also help make The Melt better, pay the bills, and help to make this podcast a full-time endeavor that I can fully devote my time to and provide you with more content. Another way of contributing would be to go to wherever it is that you subscribe to The Melt and give it a favorable review or rating, and this will help it to reach more people. You can also spread the word to friends and family via social media, email, or word of mouth. And lastly, if none of those options are readily available or appealing to you, simply send your positive thoughts and intentions. In an interconnected and quantumly entangled multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.